For those of you who don't know, Gundam Evolution shut down its servers on November 30th of last year. If you didn't play it, you might imagine its gameplay would have involved picking which brightly colored mech you want to fly into combat against the enemy's giant mechs, engaging in some giant mech combat, maybe even in space. If this is you, then you would unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, be only about half right, depending on how you feel about Overwatch. That's because Gundam Evolution was Bandai Namco's most recent failed attempt to slap a recognizable IP onto the free-to-play hero shooter genre, with all of its seasonal pass goodness. Just replace the hot men and hot women with various flavors of robot, and the robots with robots but cooler. In other words, Gundam Evolution was a strict improvement to the standard formula. Jokes aside, I did have a soft spot for Gundam Evolution, and I don't really like that I have to keep referring to it in the past tense. I wanted this game to succeed despite the odds, against a product that I think we can at least all generally agree was overly rewarded for what many still see as the only shop in town. Even during its heyday, I had some mixed feelings about Gundam Evolution, but when I heard early last year that the servers were going to be shut down, I felt an unexpected sense of dread. It's that unique feeling you get when you load up a classic game for old time's sake, only to be assaulted by a UI made for and by aliens, and also roll queue. The thing you liked is sadly dead and gone, and now all we can do is share our memories and hope that future generations can carry on the lessons of those stories. So, to honor the dearly departed, let's all come together and talk about what made this game so special, and like giving a proper eulogy, I'll start with my connection to the deceased. Why was I playing Gundam Evolution? Well, it just so happened to release at a time when I wasn't really playing anything multiplayer. It also happened to release just before Overwatch 2, a game you might have realized I had little interest in. This is of course in spite of having sunk tons of hours into the first game, mostly the pre-release beta before the soulless marketing people got involved and sucked the fun out of it.
20 kill streak?
I have 23 kills.
So I guess you could say that Gundam Evolution was my only port during a storm. Typically I gravitate towards games that require very little brain activity. MMOs and other glorified AFK genres that I can easily play on autopilot while casually glancing at some other thing off to my side, my mouth likely hanging open to catch nearby flying insects, offsetting my caloric needs while a pool of sweet-smelling saliva forms underneath my dead, expressionless face. When I get to this point, my friends, likely concerned about my sanity, will suggest a few games that we could play together to snap me out of my fugue state. And would you look at that, a shiny new free-to-play entry into a genre that I've gone on record as having enjoyed once or twice. I wouldn't be surprised if this joke managed to describe how most people stumbled onto Gundam Evolution. I say stumbled because the most frequent criticism you will hear about Gundam Evolution is that it wasn't marketed. Like, at all, really. Even the friend who suggested this game to me was surprised to learn that it was a hero shooter after I talked about the trailer I saw on Steam. Likely he was just in the market for a Gundam game that played more closely to how the show presents itself, and so his interest level was slightly diminished to a resigned, yeah, okay, by the time we were installing it. However, once we started playing the game, something miraculous started happening to me. I started getting really excited. I don't know if it was because of the mechanics being shown off in the tutorial, or the cheesy but atmospheric sound effects that scream classic anime, or even the promise of melee-only mechs and other interesting gimmicks from a roster of characters who were, at the time, completely unknown to me. I still can't say for certain, but something about this game had me hooked immediately. Thus far, I've managed to avoid talking about the gameplay in a video entirely about one game, so for this next part, we're just going to get into it. Splitting it up into sections, I'll talk about the good and the bad, because both are equally interesting to talk about. But more importantly, we're going to figure out what made this beautiful, janky bastard of a game worth playing. So I'm not a fan of games that force you to play through their tutorial, but I actually think that G.EVO here managed to benefit from this. If you had Team Fortress or Overwatch as your point of reference going into Gundam, then this tutorial would immediately highlight the two changes that affected how this game was going to be played differently. Those changes being the movement options available to all characters, and the other one being the downed mechanic. Now, I think the devs were being a little sneaky by starting you off with a character who feels the most like Soldier 76. They knew what they were doing. In his game, Soldier 76 has the ability to sprint, and that's what makes him unique. However, in Gundam Evolution, every character can sprint. Ordinarily, I might argue that a change like this would be a bad thing, as canceling a sprint animation takes time that is spent waiting before you can shoot someone. However, the choice to sprint in this game is not treated the same depending on what character you are playing, and that's because of the other movement option, dashing. Each mobile suit in this game, we're going to call them suits from now on, has an identical bar on the bottom left. Depending on how mobile your mobile suit is, your character, their speed in combat was determined by how many subdivisions this sprint bar had. The slower characters only having 1, and the fastest having 3. Dashing is a mechanic that lets you quickly zip in and out of combat in any direction by using one of these bars, allowing you to quickly turn a corner to get into a fight or avoid oncoming death with extreme agility. This changes everything, from how lethal moves are allowed to be designed from a gameplay balance perspective, as well as changing your moment-to-moment decision-making when, say, deciding whether or not to go in with a slow-moving, high-commitment attack. Against a faster mech who just arrived in combat, you were better off not trying that attack. Skill issues aside, they were most likely going to dash away and punish you. Against a slower mech, though, say one who you just saw use their only dash or just sprinted into combat, you can land this move with relative ease. That's because using one of your dashes required you to have one of these bars be entirely full, and so if you were the person with only one bar, you needed to be conscientious of sprinting even a little bit, or else you would leave yourself vulnerable. And there's also one more thing you could do with this bar, and that's hover in the air. By pressing and holding the jump button, your character would hover in the air for a while maintaining their momentum, slowly depleting your sprint bar. Without spoiling too much, for now I'll just say that there are characters that can make use of this more effectively than others, but as you might imagine, having everyone be capable of sprinting and hovering radically changes how the maps are going to be designed in this game. And before I get into characters, I will quickly mention the downed mechanic, as it is very important in its own right. Just like in Borderlands, or Army of Two, if anyone remembers that, getting dropped to 0 would put you into a downed state, instead of just killing you. You couldn't actually do anything while you were fighting to survive, and eventually you would just die. However, for a short period of time, your body remained interactable for your allies to revive or your enemies to finish off. Just like with the movement, this changed how the entire game was going to be designed and played. From a design perspective, this allowed the devs to make characters that could, for example, attempt to revive their allies from a distance, even from the safety of cover. This added incentive to quickly finish off an enemy to take them out of the fight for good. But the thing is, that wasn't always the best decision you could make. If you think about it, a downed enemy is no longer an active combatant, and so the more tactical decision could be to instead save your ammo for people who are still trying to kill you. However, if you then lost that fight, that dude that you chose not to put down, he was going to get right back up. You could see how this idea has potential. In practice, however, it frequently meant that the last thing you'd see before dying was your ally stepping over your corpse. Because reviving allies was dangerous by design, most players would only attempt it if the coast was clear. And you could exploit this behavior by doing one of my favorite things to do in this game, which was to intentionally leave a body of your enemy out in the open. Like an old-timey sniper, you could live out your sick fantasies as a bastard who shoots anyone who comes out to save their friend. leaving their body out in the open for your next unsuspecting victim to fall prey to the same trick. By far, my biggest regret for this video is going to be that I can't cover what every character did in this game. So again, assuming that you only know Overwatch, I'll summarize by saying, imagine all of those characters, but like 30 to 40% more jank, but also fun. There was Jank Genji, who threw 3 shurikens, even though visually you'd only see him throw 2. Also, he had like 30 dashes, including air dashing, and his ultimate
G.EVO
allowed him to dash thrice as much. You had Robot Mercy, except their tether, as previously mentioned, allowed them to revive downed allies. Except I lied, because they also have a turret, so they were actually Robot Torbjorn, but with Anna's ultimate. Also, they could turn into a plane. There was Roadhog, except he had a shield that he could fire behind, and instead of pulling enemies into his team, he instead pulled himself into the enemies, and then promptly died, as the best characters in the game didn't give a shit about that shield. And Pale Rider, your Soldier 76 stand-in who had more things to do now that sprinting was no longer an ability. That thing being a dinky little slow field he could throw maybe a foot in front of his face, and lasted like a second. To my chagrin, his ultimate didn't turn your gun into aimbot. However, it did allow him to rapidly reload while also improving his ability to strafe, so you couldn't suck like me and expect to play him well. You could make these comparisons for as long as you'd like, but if you've played Gundam Evolution, first of all, solidarity, brother. Then you also probably know that I'm being a little cheeky and dishonest here. Those comparisons were definitely being made at the time, but the roles that those Gundam characters filled in comparison to their Overwatch counterparts could not have been any more different. In fact, there were no roles in Gundam Evolution. You'll notice how there are no subdivisions for tanks, healers, or DPS. There were characters who could take more hits, and there were characters who could heal, but those things were almost treated like gimmicks that could be stapled onto just about any character. GM, the character that I probably played the most, was a bizarre mix of support, defense, and healer, and the devs accomplished this by giving him the lowest health pool in the game, as well as only a single dash, making him very easy to kill. They also had a shield, and were one of only 2 characters in the original roster who could fire while also blocking. And their weapon was also pinpoint accurate, and could easily kill with a few well-placed headshots. They also had a melee get-off-of-me move that stunned and could lead into a headshot, as well as an incredible healing grenade, and a thermal charge that they could throw and detonate, and their ultimate allowed them to throw down proximity mines. If all of that sounded like the developers just slapping whatever they wanted onto a character and calling it a day, then yeah, that's sort of what it felt like. I don't think repair grenades or even health packs come from the source material, but maybe I just haven't been watching enough Gundam. The weird thing though, it kinda works. At least for me it did. One of the reasons that I grew tired of Overwatch and Team Fortress before that was how slow and turtle-like those games get sometimes. Both teams just become trapped in this forever fight around whatever the current objective is and just wait for their ultimates, and only then will people start to die and progress get made. In Gundam Evolution though, people were dying all the time. Because every character could sprint, dash, and then heal or defend themselves in some way, it basically played like a full team of flankers who would just periodically work together to hold a point. Methis, the Mercy character that I was talking about, this guy was a murderer, he'd fuck you up. A headshot from GM Sniper killed more than 80% of the cast of this game, without needing to charge at all, and sometimes he could do it in the air. Easily the most busted sniper character that anyone has ever made. The first character that I played, Gundam Barbados, was a melee-only character in that same game with that sniper I just mentioned, and he was probably the most consistently topping character throughout each of the competitive seasons. And that's because if this guy hits you with his charged smash, you were dead. It was such a dangerous move that the enemy team was allowed to hear it being charged from around a corner. And yet, if he landed it, it would floor you even if you had a shield up. And his follow-up move would not only just kill you, but it would destroy your body instantly as well. This character almost single-handedly made the concept of tanking meaningless, because if there was a single choke point on the map, all you had to do was stick this asshole around a corner, and if you were one of those guys that only had one dash to get away from him, you were just fucked. If you think that's nuts, let's talk about Oshimar. This guy was the flying character, able to shrink his hitbox while flying up to the map's invisible ceiling. And after that would run out, he had a completely stable hover that used very little boost. And he also had a battle rifle, and also an incendiary grenade that felt like it was hit scan. Now, I'm no expert on ranked play, but I feel pretty confident in saying that this game's balance was all over the place, and it definitely contributed to why this game never caught on. It was very difficult to take Gundam Evolution seriously as a spectator sport. But you know what? Who cares, man? This game was fun as shit. If you are the kind of person who likes to win these kinds of games all by yourself and look swaggy as hell while you kill the entire enemy team, this was the game to play. Do you know what I'm saying? This game had some wipeouts. Nothing felt better than taking a character like Guntank. Motherfucker doesn't even got legs and is so easy your girlfriend can play them, and just wiping the floor with people. God, I love Guntank. So, taking everything I just said in mind, let's reminisce about the maps. Map design is obviously very important to a genre that's entirely about teamwork and tactics, and I think, well, I could say the maps were creative. That's a nice thing to say. Okay, no, seriously. I think based on the characters and mechanics, the developers had a Herculean task ahead of them in trying to design maps for this game. I'm not even certain how intentional the decisions they made were, but I'll highlight some ideas I think worked. Number one was keeping the teams mobile by moving the objectives, and I don't mean alt-tabbing on the payload, thank God there's none of that. On King of the Hill style maps, capture points would change after a few seconds, putting an end to any stalemate and shifting to a new area that favors different characters. Keep in mind there's no role queuing in this game. You could have made almost an entire team out of melee characters if you wanted. So, while you were kicking ass on point A, which was a claustrophobic building fight, point B or C might have been out in the open, surrounded by buildings that gave cover and health pickups for long-range attackers. On attack and defense maps, where the objective was to either place or defuse a bomb Counter-Strike style, attackers could arm the bomb on point A or B. One point usually favored snipers, while the other was typically indoors. The attackers could also capture a forward respawn point to make this easier, but the defenders were allowed to recapture this point as well. In practice, this meant that attackers would keep defenders on their toes by dividing their attention between three potential objectives. Anyone on the attacking team was allowed to arm a bomb, and remember, this is the game that has characters that can dash through the air or fly over walls. So, in reality, likely in an attempt to curb this degenerate gameplay, the devs went a little overboard in creating choke points designed to stop this exact thing, which I think it kind of missed the point. Maps were really hit and miss, and there was at least one map that I just hated. It sucked. The attackers were made to walk into a firing squad, and both bomb locations, as well as the forward respawn point, funnel you through the same narrow hallway. You almost never saw the second half of this map, as you could defend that hallway while making salsa at your desk. Credit where it's due, the maps actually felt pretty different from each other in terms of layout and aesthetics. There may be no space combat, but you have a few good space-themed maps. You've got a fire planet, things that look like military installations or production plants. You had a few good cities to fight in that attempted to remind you of the sense of scale. While not my favorite map, the Colony has a really fun skybox, as well as these Mario Party-style shifting walls and also conveyor belts. Again, fun in concept, but pretty goofy overall in execution. For better or worse, you could at least say that the devs weren't afraid to try some things, and it rarely felt as though you were just firing in a hallway. I think I'd be doing a poor job with this video if I had failed to mention the potential that this game had to be something great. Most of the complaints that I've had until now were about things that you could potentially have fixed if the game had received more attention and feedback. And I also get the impression that the people who actually made this game were being held back by their publisher. Maybe I'm just talking out of my ass, but there was clearly a lot of love that was put into the details of this game. It's things like the small environmental noises, and the perfect heroic sort of tone that the soundtrack captured to make you feel like you were an ace pilot about to head into combat. I think anyone could appreciate the flavor that this added to the game, even if you're not a Gundam fan. Like how instead of red versus blue, the teams were the Earthnoids and the Spacenoids. I'm not about to let a dirty Spacenoid onto my planet. There's even a ton of charm in things like the customizable pilot voices and the collectible sprays. And it made me wish that there was more of this stuff that would be added later on. Like if you could unlock the voices of the anime characters.
I'm doing something extremely wicked.
I actually think that having your game launch with these details in place is more important than having your game have good balance from day one. There was always a chance that future patches could iron out the jank, but it was a lot less likely that I would have stuck around to find out if I just thought that this game was another generic hero shooter. I want to take a step back from the actual game and talk about the value that I see in a product like Gundam Evolution. At the start of this video, I mentioned how upset I was to hear about Gundam Evolution's eventual shutdown, even though I wasn't playing it at the time. Yet this news got me and many other members of the Gundam Evolution community to come back in full force to try and recapture some of the nostalgia from when we last played. And let me tell you, man, those games that I played during those last few weeks were absolutely incredible. Everyone in these games were just so nice and excited to have people playing their game again. I remember there was this game where we lost someone on our team partway through the first round. Typically that's the end, right? You're down a person and then everyone starts to complain and then leave quickly to get onto their next game. But this was the final day, the final hours even, that this game would be playable. And so I got to typing. I needed to rally my team and to let them know that we weren't going to take this sitting down. We couldn't let these goddamn Spacenoids get away with an easy victory. And man, we didn't just put up a fight, we kicked their ass. I think something inside of all of us just activated, cause man, I have never gamed that hard before in my life. Most online games never truly die. They usually enter this horrible zombie state that is completely unplayable with a mostly dead player base of fringe weirdos. Not Gundam Evolution. It went out with a bang, and you could tell that even the game developers saw this as one final hurrah. They ended up releasing a bunch of work-in-progress skins and just giving out a ton of stuff that they had been working on prior to the announcement of the shutdown, and also, quite admirably, they turned off the sale of premium cash. Instead, they created a bunch of new options for you to spend your leftover currency on a ton of stuff so that you could better enjoy your last few games. I'm going to go on a slight tangent here, but I'm always going to remember this game as my gateway into the Gundam franchise. Some minor spoilers for my next series of videos, but I ended up devoting a good portion of my time while I was in Japan last September looking for a gun tank model I could take home. And I even ended up visiting the Gundam base in Tokyo, which is not something I would have bothered with or convinced a friend to go along with me had I not played Gundam Evolution. Prior to this, my knowledge of the Gundam franchise came entirely from osmosis, by having my local TV station, YTV, air Gundam Seed after the show that I wanted to watch, and all I knew about it was that it had teenagers and robots. Now that I've actually gone back and watched a decent bit of Gundam, I actually know that it's about psychic teenagers using secret government tech to commit war crimes, and also some of the worst fictional names of all time. You know you're fucked when names like Amuro Ray and Char Aznable start to look normal by comparison. Check out Fa Yuri. How about Alleluia Hapatism, a name I can't say without scowling? You got fucking Mr. Bushido, Prayer Reverie. This dude's name is Full Frontal. How do you not burst out into laughter when Full Frontal is assaulting your base? The funny thing is that I don't even know if I like the shows all that much, but I've enjoyed watching them nonetheless because of all the inside humor and references that I've come to appreciate since I started. The shows have added this extra layer of context to the game that I've already enjoyed playing, and now this culture that I was always curious about has become a part of me. Since the time that this game shut down last November, I've gone and built my first 2 Gunpla, and I had a surprising amount of fun doing it, and I was shocked to see just how intuitive the instructions were, even though they were in Japanese. And I'll probably continue to pick up and watch the anime from time to time. If you have any recommendations, then feel free to let me know. You know what? I think I'm going to end on that note. If there was a lesson that I could impart to you to try and summarize all of this, it would be that when your friend asks you to play a new game that looks a little weird, maybe give it a try. Don't be content to play the same games day in and day out, because life is all about going out and making new experiences. And you can't do that if you don't challenge yourself from time to time. Try something new, and try to learn something about yourself and your tastes, and maybe you will stumble onto something that will change your life in a positive way. So thank you, Gundam Evolution, and the people who made it, and also the people who played it. Hopefully, this game's untimely death will inspire others to look back and learn from what made you so unique and memorable. And who knows, maybe the next jank yet fun game is already out there. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked this video and you want to support me, then please follow and subscribe. I may even have some links to places where you can donate if you feel so inclined, but please don't feel pressured to do that. In lieu of my typical outro, I will instead say, "Good night, sweet prince, and may a flight of ball Gundams carry thee to thy rest."